Hi, and welcome to the show where we share the stories of the many who intersect with our healthcare system but are rarely heard from. My name is Kevin Poe, founder and editor of KevinMD. Rate and review the show at kevinmd.com/rate. Subscribe at kevinmd.com/follow. Today in the show, we have Travis Hornsby. He's a chartered financial analyst. His KevinMD article is titled 3 Ways to Cut Years Off Your Medical School Loan Repayment Period. Travis, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
We'll get to the article in a little bit, but first off, just share your story and journey to where you are today.
I used to be a bond trader, got good at Excel, met my now wife who had a lot of medical school loans. So I used those Excel tools that I developed trading bonds to come up with her optimal loan repayment strategy between forgiveness and refinancing. She said I should charge her friends who are desperate for help. And that was back in 2016. Now we've got a team of 9 consultants. We've advised more student loan debt than anybody else in the country. It's about $2 billion now.
Excellent. And this episode is going to be focused on student loans. So before we get into your article, just give me the landscape in 2022 for the average medical student. What kind of student loan debt are they typically facing when they graduate?
Like 200 to 300,000 is probably typical, but some people that go to private schools owe as much as 400,000. And, I would say 10 years ago, public service loan forgiveness was very much not a trusted program. People didn't think it was going to actually happen. That's really totally different now, where a lot of people are actually receiving forgiveness through that program. And there's a lot more awareness that that's an actual option for people.
So tell us a little bit more about that program and maybe some misconceptions about it that medical students may not be aware of.
Well, there was a high rejection rate early on in the program, but that's because the program was designed in a flawed way from the beginning. So there's a temporary program in place right now called the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Waiver that frankly could result in a lot of your physicians that are in their late 30s, 40s, and 50s having their entire loan balance forgiven completely due to this program that expires October 31st. So this program got passed by an executive action from the Biden administration to deal with those bad headlines from PSLF about 99% of people getting rejected. So the way that people can get credit for this is regardless of what payment program you were on, what loan type you have, if you consolidate and apply at studentaid.gov by October 31st, you could get sort of retroactively all of your nonprofit hospital or government hospital credit applied to your loans and have the whole thing forgiven tax-free, which is really transformational. Now,
is there a catch? Do they have to serve in a publicly needed area afterwards? What's the commitment that a physician needs to do?
So you basically can get as much credit as you qualify for added to your 10 years. You don't actually have to wait and have the full 10 years to apply for this. So there's really no catch. It's retrospective. It's looking backwards. So it's based off of what you already did, not what you're promising to do. So the catch is that you had to have been working full-time at a 501c3 hospital or a government employer. And if you were, they're counting most kinds of forbearances, most kinds of deferments, as well as any repayment plan on any kind of loan. And what we're telling people, for most physicians, you should consolidate. Not all physicians should, though, because if your payment is scheduled to be $300 a month, consolidating will recalculate your payment. So if you were a resident or fellow the last time you recertify your income, then that could potentially reset your payments early, which we want to avoid. So not all physicians should do this, but a whole lot of physicians, especially the ones that are older physicians, might have loans at a 2% interest rate that they had from the mid 2000s or before. And they just were holding that debt around because inflation's so high, a 2% rate's pretty good. Mm-hmm. So what people should be thinking about instead is, do they qualify for complete forgiveness, which is only available to a lot of these physicians due to this PSLF waiver program until October 31st is the application deadline.
All right, let's talk more about student loans. This is our KevinMD article. This is actually written back in 2018, but I think a lot of the points still are salient. It's titled 3 Ways to Cut Your Medical School Loan Repayment Period. Now, for those who didn't get a chance to read the article, just summarize it and share the story of why you decided to write it.
Well, I think that there's a lot of different hacks for people to get out of debt faster. Yeah. So I think that you can certainly refinance your loans. I mean, during the 2.5 years of paused interest that have been going on, most people that refinance probably regret it. But I don't think that that's something that you should worry about, because you can't change the past. You have to change the future, right? Mm-hmm. So public service loan forgiveness is certainly one way to get rid of your loans faster. Another way is to sign up for one of the plans that gets you interest subsidies and training. So you can sign up for revised pay as you earn and get subsidies on your interest if you're going through training to pay back less of your debt and therefore get your loans paid off faster. And then probably third, I would say, is just refinancing to a lower interest rate if that's the right thing for you to do at the right time. So that means, when you're no longer getting any interest subsidies, when you're attending in a private practice, you can refinance to get, your debt payments going a lot more towards principal than interest.
So normally, what's the process for refinancing? Are there certainly websites or consultants to help these physicians? What are some resources that they can look at to refinance some of their loans?
Well, there's a lot of conflicts of interest in this. So, every website pretty much gets paid a percentage of the loan when you refinance, including ours. And so the way we mitigate the conflict of interest is to give cash rebates to people that are refinancing. So ours are the largest anywhere on the internet. So we'll typically give somebody 1,000 or more for refinancing a medical school sized loan. And we take a lot lower commission than other websites. And that's intentional because we, have a consulting business where we're trying to give paid advice from CFP professionals, CFA professionals. And we want the purpose to be getting the people the best rate. The reason we're in the refinancing business is because I feel like you're going to get a better deal going through a place like Student Loan Planner than applying directly from the mailer that you get in the mail, where you're not going to get any kind of bonuses or special deals. So it's kind of a weird market, right? In mortgages, you typically pay a fee, you might have an origination fee. Whereas, in student loan refinancing, there's a reverse origination fee. The problem with that, and I say reverse origination fee because we give a cash bonus to people that refinance through our site. But the problem with that is that you lose all the forgiveness, you lose all the options for PSLF waiver, you lose income-based repayment. So there's a lot of reasons not to refinance. And, that's not a solution, it's a tool. So we have to ask the physician, like, what's their strategy? What's their goals? What are their dreams? And then you want to make the loan strategy match that versus the other way around.
So we're now in an era of tightening monetary policy, and interest rates in general are going up. How does that affect the student loan repayment market?
I mean, it's been really bad. I mean, in fact, I would say initially the administration was going to start payments January 31st of 2022. And then they, extended that in kind of part due to political pressures from the Build Back Better Act not passing. They had to deliver something after that failed because, folks were disappointed. So what's interesting is people could have locked in an interest rate in most cases below 3% for 20 years back in January of 2022. Now we're seeing more like 5%. So if you just do some math, anybody who was planning to pay back their loans over an extended period of time has actually lost a lot more money getting that 0% interest pause extended than if that had not been extended and people have been encouraged to refinance at ultra low rates back at the beginning of this year. So one thing that I can say is because interest rates are much higher now, you're kind of losing out, I think, on less by not refinancing, which is kind of a good thing. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility to just wait and see when interest does actually end. And then, for those who are in a high income private practice sort of specialties that do need to refinance, probably you could just apply whenever the pause does end. But it's certainly something that we're noticing. There's also a really weird effect with the yield curve, which is just the interest rates the government pays investors to borrow at. It's basically the same yield almost across the board versus like short-term rates are about 3%, long-term rates are about 3%. So we're seeing usually you get a much better rate for refinancing to a short-term 5-year deal. We're seeing there not being a huge difference between 5 and 10-year deals and like 15 and 20-year deals. So that's one reason why we would maybe do like a longer term refinance because you're not being rewarded for those much higher required payments if you do end up taking that path.
Now, you work with a lot of residents and physicians. What would you say are some of the biggest red flags or mistakes that you see?
Just focusing on the wrong things, right? Your student loan program is not going to be the thing that's going to destroy your finances. But a lot of people act like their house is on fire if they don't pay $10,000 a month in their loans. I think that there's just maybe other more important goals to get secured first. I think for those who have families, you probably need to get a really good own occupation and specialty disability insurance policy. You need term life insurance if you have kids. You need to start an emergency fund, have the retirement account set up, the brokerage account set up. And the student loans just need to be a thing that doesn't stress you out. So for some people, that does mean refinancing, paying it back in 5 years, living like, you're still in training when you're few years out of residency or fellowship. For others, though, it means going for a forgiveness plan and paying as little as possible. I think that one thing that's going to happen for physicians is more private practice physicians, I predict, are going to be going for student loan forgiveness programs in the future because I think they're going to continue to make them more and more generous. So right now, most physicians have this idea of, the way I deal with my loans is I go for the loan forgiveness program for public servants or I pay them back. I think there's going to be increasingly a third option, which is to keep your loans around for 20 years while paying based on your income. And I think that the tax consequences of loan forgiveness are probably also going to go away for that population. So I think that the most common mistakes from a student loan perspective are filing taxes the wrong way. People often need to file separately for taxes, not realizing all the tools at their disposal and just making the mistake that everybody should sign up for the revised pay-as-you-earn program because that's what my $15 an hour loan servicer rep told me to do.
We're talking to Travis Hornsby. He's a chartered financial analyst. His KevinMD article is 3 Ways to Cut Years Off Your Medical School Loan Repayment Period. Travis, as you said earlier, there are a lot of consultants, a lot of companies that deal with loan consolidation. What are some things that physicians should look out for when researching or going to the websites of these companies?
I mean, I would say financial advisors tend to use student loans as a sort of a marketing tactic versus as something that they actually are deep experts in. Not the case for everybody, but we did 370 individual plans last month. So we do more plans in a week that most financial advisors will do in their career. So just like if you were going to a doctor for a particular procedure, you'd want to make sure that doctor was doing a lot of that procedure, right? That's not the case. A lot of times financial advisors are really afraid of looking incompetent on student loans because they want to win your business for retirement and investing. And so they might try to manage your student loans when they in fact don't really know that much about it. So I would ask questions like, when should two spouses use different repayment plans? When can spouses file separately in community property states? Explain the different dozen repayment programs that exist on student loans. You want to make sure the person that's giving you advice has enough knowledge, enough competence. Second thing I would say is if the person does offer student loan refinancing, are you being given any incentives to refinance? Are you getting any bonuses? The reason I bring that up is if you're not, then that means that they're retaining that full commission for refinancing for themselves, which presents a very large conflict of interest. If you're getting paid $1,000 to tell somebody to refinance, and you're giving away your advice for free, which is the model of some companies, that's a very flawed model. That's going to result in advice that's going to be tilted towards one solution, which might not be in your best interest. So the way we run the business is different. It's a high volume. It's a few $100. It's not trying to get a multi-thousand per year financial planning relationship. And so we would kind of say, what are your results? What are your expertise? Are you a specialist in this area? And I think that a lot of really ethical financial planners that we talk to often will outsource something like this to a specialist group like ours because they're trying to get their clients the optimal solution. So that's what I would say to look out for.
And in terms of specialist groups, we're talking about specific groups that deal with physicians only?
The math is the same for physicians and non-physicians when it comes to student loan advice. I mean, I don't think that it necessarily has to be exclusively specializing in physicians. If I was going to work with a financial planner, I'd probably want a fee-only fiduciary planner that does specialize in physicians because there's a lot of unique things that physicians do need. And I do think that it's probably great to get advice from somebody that is exclusively paid by you. The model, I think for a generalist, that's kind of the idea. Is your financial planner is your generalist, your primary care physician. And then you might have other needs depending on the complexity of your financial situation. So if you trust an estate attorney, a CPA, if you're a practice owner, a student loan specialist like us, if you have complex, large student loans. So that's the way I would suggest that somebody think about dealing with financial professionals is ask about conflicts of interest, ask people to explain how their advice could be conflicted. If somebody's got a very straightforward answer to that, I would trust working with that person. If the person tries to deflect, then that probably means they're making a whole lot of money from financial products. They don't want to disclose that to you.
And my final question, what are some of your take-home messages that you want to leave with the KevinMD audience?
Really pay attention to the PSLF waiver. This is the most transformational opportunity to get loan forgiveness I've ever seen in the 6 years I've been doing this. And please share the PSLF waiver opportunity with your friends and colleagues because a whole lot of them, especially the non-financially oriented ones, are going to miss out on that. So we certainly talk about it on the Student Loan Planner podcast that we do. And I just hope that people really learn about this opportunity. It's just incredibly, incredibly important because of that expiration date of October 31st of this year.
And how can people reach you?
The Student Loan Planner podcast, if you enjoy listening to podcasts, which I assume this audience does. And they can also reach me at travis@studentloanplanner.com. This is my email. And our website, obviously, studentloanplanner.com has a bunch of free and then paid one-on-one counseling resources that they can utilize.
Travis, thank you so much for sharing your time and insight. Thanks again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.